2020-25? The above graph shows the world population access to electricity in 1997, and in 2017 the percentage of the total world population with electricity access in 2017 was 11 percentage points higher than that in 1997. Both in 1997 and in 2017, less than 80% of the rural population had access to electricity, while over 90% of the urban population had access to electricity in 1997. 36% of the rural population did not have electricity access, while 5% of the urban population did not have access to electricity. The percentage of the rural population without electricity access in 2017 was 20 percentage points lower than that in 1997. The percentage of the urban population without electricity access decreased from 5% in 1997 to 3% in 2017. 36-21-15%. The graph above shows the Canadian volunteer rates and average annual hours of 7 age groups in 2007-2007. In these groups, the volunteer rates ranged from 29% to 58%, and the Canadian average rate was 46%, 29-58, 46. The average annual hours increased with age except for the group aged between 25 and 34, which volunteered an average of 133 hours 25 to 34, 133. The 15 to 24 age group showed the highest volunteer rate but the second fewest average annual hours. 15 to 24. The 35 to 44 age group had fewer average annual hours than the 45 to 54 age group, while the 55 to 64 and 65 to 74 age groups showed the same average annual hours. 35 to 44, 45 to 54 more, 55 to 64, 65 to 74. Despite their lowest rate of volunteering, seniors age 75 and older gave more hours on average than any other age group, 75. Fewer more. The graph above shows where Americans got most of their news about national and international issues from 2001 to 2010, 2001-2010. Television continued to be cited most frequently as a main source for national and international news, although the percentage in 2010 was the lowest recorded during the 10-year period 2010. Newspapers had been the second most frequent source for news until 2007, but they were surpassed by the Internet in 2008, 2007, 2008. In 2010, the percentage of people relying on newspapers was less than half that of people relying on television. 2010. The Internet was the second most preferred source for news in 2010, with the percentage being more than 3 times as high as in 2001, 2010, 2001. In 2010, the percentage of people citing radio as a main news source was lowest, recording 16%, which was less than half that of people relying on newspapers. 2010-16. Less more. The above graphs show the renewable energy consumption by energy source in the U.S. in the years 2006 and 2010, 2006-2010. Biomass was the leading renewable energy source in both 2006 and 2010, increasing from 49% in 2006 to 53% in 2010, 2006-2010, 2006 49, 2010, 53. Hydroelectricity in 2010 remained in second place for renewable energy consumption, because its share had rapidly increased by 12 percentage points during the period. 2010-12. The most remarkable growth was in wind power, which showed a 7 percentage point increase in consumption during the same period. 7. The share of geothermal energy remained unchanged at 3% of renewable energy consumption in both years. 3. Likewise, there was no change in the percentage of solar energy, which stayed steady at 1% during the same period. 1. Increase decreased. The graph above shows unemployment rates by race and education in 2010 in the United States. 2010. The unemployment rate for Asian Americans was lower than for white Americans, for those with a high school diploma and those who did not finish high school. However, if we look at educational levels beyond a high school diploma, Asian Americans had a higher unemployment rate than comparable white Americans, with the gap largest for those with an advanced degree. The unemployment rate of Asian Americans was highest for those who did not finish high school, recording 10.9%. 10.9. By contrast, the unemployment rate for Asian Americans was lowest for those with an advanced degree, recording less than half that of Asian Americans with a high school diploma. For white Americans, the unemployment rate was highest for those without a high school diploma, recording 15%, which was more than 4 times that of white Americans with an advanced degree. 15 largest smallest 2010. The graph above shows the total expenditures on long-term care for older people, as a percentage of GDP in 6 OECD countries in 2000-2006 OECD. Norway and Sweden stand out in this comparison, with substantially higher spending than any other country surveyed. Financing for long-term care for older people in Spain comes predominantly from private sources, which account for more than 2/3 of total spending. 3-2. Japan has the highest ratio of private spending involved in long-term care services among all the countries. The graph indicates that Germany and the United Kingdom are similar in terms of overall spending levels on long-term care. Public funding is the primary source of financing for long-term care services in all countries surveyed with the exception of Spain. Highest smallest. The above graph shows world petroleum consumption by region every 10 years from 1980 to 2010, 1980 2010. Over the whole period, the total amount of petroleum consumed increased, reaching almost 85 million barrels per day in 2010-2010. 85. During this period, Asia experienced the biggest increase in the share of world petroleum consumption, from 16% in 1980 to 29% in 2010. 1980 16 2010 29. Central and South America, the Middle East and Africa also saw an increase, with their combined share of petroleum consumption rising to 20% in 2010, 2010-20. In North America, Europe and the former Soviet Union, on the other hand, the share of petroleum consumption decreased in the years 1990, 2000 and 2010, compared to the previous survey year, 1990, 2000, 2010. North America ranked as the world's biggest petroleum consumer until 2000, but it ranked second after Asia in 2010, 2000, 2010 too. The above graph shows the unpaid care by age and sex provided to family members, friends, neighbors or others in England in 2011-2011. The percentage of men and women providing some level of unpaid care rose incrementally along with age, up to age 64. The gender gap was particularly notable among those aged 25 to 49 and 50 to 64, with a smaller gap present at ages 0 to 24, 25, 49, 50, 64, 0, 24. However, in the age category 65 and above, the disparity reversed, with the percentage of men providing unpaid care exceeding the percentage of women, 65. The category 1 to 19 hours per week of unpaid care was the most common level of provision among males and females at most ages 1-19. In general, unpaid care provided at the level of 50 hours or more was less common among people in the top 2 age groups, compared with those in lower age groups, 50. Less more. The graph above shows the mineral comparison of potatoes versus sweet potatoes by recommended dietary allowances RDA percentages. RDA. Potatoes have higher RDA percentages for 4 of the 9 minerals in the graph than sweet potatoes, and have the same percentage for 1 mineral magnesium 9 for RDA. The RDA percentages for calcium, iron and manganese are higher in sweet potatoes than in potatoes, RDA. Sweet potatoes have about twice the RDA percentage for iron than potatoes RDA. Potatoes have a higher RDA percentage of copper than any other mineral, whereas sweet potatoes have the highest RDA percentage for manganese RDA, copper, potassium. Sodium and zinc have the lowest RDA percentage of minerals contained in sweet potatoes RDA, copper, potassium. The above graph compares the average number of dependents per employed person in each household for each region in 2012 and as forecast for 2032, 2012, 2032. China had 0.77 dependents per employed worker in the household in 2012, but the ratio will have increased to 1.08 dependents per worker by 2032, 2012 0.77, 2032 1.08. Although developing Asia and South America had the same dependency ratio of 1.38 at first, the former's ratio will be higher in 2032, 1.38. 2032 North America in 2032 is expected to have the same ratio of dependence as Western Europe in 2012. 2032-2012. The Middle East and North Africa had a dependency ratio more than 3 times as large as China's, but this will decline significantly by 0.21 over the next 2 decades, 0.21, more or less. The Middle East and North Africa had the highest ratio in 2012, and they are projected to continue holding this record through 2032-2012, 2032, more or less 2012-2032. The graph above compares growth in greenhouse gas GHG emissions with growth in primary energy use, population, and gross domestic product GDP in the United States. Over the period of 1990 to 2010, the U.S. economy doubled in size, while the population grew about 20% and energy use and GHG emissions grew around 10%. 1990 2010, 2010. The rate of GHG emissions rose roughly in concert with growth in energy use and population, but substantially more slowly than the rate of overall economic growth. Over a period of 2020 to 2030, U.S. primary energy consumption is predicted to grow at a slower pace than GDP and population. 2020-2030, 1. Between 1990 and 2010, total U.S. GHG emissions fell at a relatively steady pace 1990-2010. By 2030, the U.S. economy will have maintained a consistent level of growth, outpacing both energy use and GHG emissions. 2030. Grew.